Welcome to Between Product and Partnerships, a podcast focused on bringing together product, partnership, and engineering leaders to discuss how to build, support, and scale SaaS ecosystems. This podcast is presented by Pandium, an integration platform for building native integrations.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for listening to our podcast, Between Product and Partnerships, where we talk about the challenges and what it takes to build integrations, partnerships, SaaS platforms, and technology generally. Today, we are super excited, or I'm super excited, because we have two people on here with me. We've got Heather Flanagan and Shon Urbas. Heather is the principal of Spherical Cow Consulting and has been involved in leadership roles with a ton of open standards organizations. Identity and standards are her jam. And we've also got Shon, who some of you may know. He's our CTO and co-founder here at Pandium. He leads the development of our embedded integration platform and our engineering team. He's got about 2 decades of experience in software and has a passion for standards and has actually spoken about OAuth at a number of conferences, if you would believe it or not. So thanks you guys for joining us today, and we will go ahead and get started. So we'll jump right into Heather's bread and butter here. What do you think are the current challenges in developing standards in the new age of AI? And what do you think are some of the challenges in determining the right organizations to help enforce these standards?
So there's a whole bunch of interesting challenges in this space right now, not the least of which is the speed that people want to move in. People, companies, the expectation of end users straight to the expectation of CEOs of, no, we've got to get stuff out now. There's no time to waste. And that bugs me a lot because the standards process naturally slows things down, right? Because it makes you say, wait, we know you can, but should you? Because it makes you go through like security evaluations. It makes you actually look at a full stack of what does it mean from the base layers of the internet all the way up to the user experience, right? It forces you to think more deeply, to build consensus, and that takes time. So I'm seeing just that increased tension of go fast versus, but please don't break things.
Yeah, and how do you help address that? I mean, I think that's a common problem in software development generally, right? And AI is definitely not excluded from that.
Honestly, I haven't figured that out yet because one of the interesting challenges that I think happens in identity broadly and standards more specifically is we have our own language, right? In how we talk about things, in what our priorities are, and what we're trying to accomplish in the world. And that's all very, very important stuff. We need the language to know what we're talking about. We need to have the priorities and the strategy to know what we're aiming for. Unfortunately, we are not usually the business decision makers, right? We're not setting strategy for the whole company. And so our priorities don't always align gracefully with the business priorities. And our jargon, our language, which we do need, certainly doesn't translate easily into business requirements or financial requirements or whatnot. And so we see all of this, we see all the things we need to do, but we are, in terms of like all the different silos that you might find in a business, in such a position that we've got to speak all the languages. And in standards development, again, you have to speak all of the languages to get a standard that's going to actually be implemented in the world. And that's really, really hard. That's like sets the bar for people to participate higher than it does to be, say, a product manager or to be an executive or something like that. The bar is definitely different for us. And I think that's why I'm like, I see the problem. I don't know how to resolve the problem.
I mean, I guess tactically, how do you guys think about that? Like, is there like a framework you use, or thinking about like the different user types, the people, consumers, I guess?
Well, what often happens, not always, but what often happens is the people working on the standards will kind of put their head down and say, okay, we've caught rumor of there's this problem, or we know there's this problem because we've seen the security issues, so we're going to solve for it. Hopefully someone will adopt it.
A reactive thing.
But that's like as far as it gets. It is a very, very reactive thing. There are efforts to, especially in some of the standards organizations, they do a better job at saying, no, you really do have to consider the end user. The W3C, for example, is particularly good at requiring accessibility reviews. Even for APIs, it's like, okay, no, but have you thought about how this is going to be presented to users? Have you made it possible to have different choices in colors and different choices in, how it's described and layout and whatnot that takes that into account somewhat? But none of that then turns into say, is there a business need? The business need is almost implied by people being funded by their companies to work on things.
Shon, I saw you nodding. What are your thoughts?
No, I mean, this is sort of tangential, but you were talking about how language is really important in the standards process. And I think one of the things we talk about, Cristina and I, is just like sometimes the jargon around different technologies, and AI is right in the midst of all that. Like we'll talk about it later, but MCP everything, or like LLMs, ChatGPT, all the different words and verbiages, and like having to marry that also with our really difficult concepts in auth. Our company, we do a lot of stuff around authentication and stuff. I still feel like a novice when talking about the different aspects of the specifications that go into these authentication protocols and stuff. Bridging the two, there's just, it's kind of scary to think about, actually.
It's scary, but if someone asked me once if I could suggest one trait that makes for a successful identity person and a successful standards person, it's curiosity. It's the willingness to come in and say, how is this working? Why is this working? Does this actually work? How can I help make it better? The asking questions and coming into it is the single most important trait I think you have to hold on to as you're engaging with all of it, because otherwise you're 100% right. It's so easy to get overwhelmed. Once upon a time, long ago in a galaxy far, far away, right, there were people that read every RFC that came out because they could. There was only a couple dozen a year, and that became like 100 a year. And then that became a couple hundred a year. And then there's other standards organizations and they're producing standards, right? And then there's the, analyst firms that are coming in saying, well, we're not working on standards, but we're going to talk about the trends. And that should hopefully inform the standards or vice versa. No one can keep track of everything that's going on at this point, which is also, it's a great opportunity for people like me to say, great, where is my curiosity going to take me? Because there is no end to where I could go. But it's also scary because, well, that means there's probably a lot of reinventing wheels of, well, do you know who's working on delegation? What level of delegation? How is that happening? Yeah.
Just to add to the organizations and stuff, also like reporting and compliance is a whole nother layer on top of all that. And there seems to be a lot of overlap. So we just went through a SOC too.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting too that what you guys are saying, Heather, you especially, that when I think of standards, and I think a lot of our listeners too, you think about like this rigidity and something that's like well established and potentially like kind of dry. And what you're describing is actually a lot of creativity, right? It's being able to come in and make an assessment and then come up with your own ideas about like how that should be translated and communicated, which is a different take maybe on what standards actually are. And, in my experience, people that work in technology, especially engineering, like deeply technical folks, are creative. There's a little bit of like artistry involved in all of this stuff. And the combination of that artistry and then trying to create a box within where folks are supposed to work, I'm sure that creates some tension.
Oh, it does, because, any artist will tell you, you take it personally when someone says your art is ugly. It's a wait, no, but I put my heart and soul into this. I've given a lot of thought to this. Like, look at this thing. How can you say it's not pretty? Engineers actually have exactly the same reaction more often than not, unless they've gone through a lot of training or have been beaten up a lot in meetings. Your idea may be all very well and good, but you're coming at it from one perspective by default. Yours. And the standards process forces you to consider other use cases and other scenarios. And I think that's one of my favorite things about the standards process, actually.
I was going to add to that. I think what you sort of mentioned, Cristina, with respect to like the way it's almost the inverse. The standards exist and there are these like codified rules, but they're also made to allow the most people to use them. If like no one's going to use a standard, it's not useful. And so like there are so many different options, like to talk about OAuth 2 as an example of a standard that was made by a giant committee of people coming together and saying, this is what I need for my application. This is what I need for my, and it actually makes it confusing in some ways. A new term I learned at the last conference I went to was the idea of a profile. And so there are all these different, that's like a whole brand new word to me. When you're setting up security and you're setting up your IAM and all the different options, like that are unique to you, that's thought of as a profile. And like you can have standards around the options that go into fulfilling a standard. It's just, I don't know, there's some meta magic there too.
Right. For a specification that is like we'll go ahead and pick on OAuth, because who doesn't love picking on OAuth really at the end of the day? It has to be all things to all people. A profile can never expand on that. It can only narrow down. Right? It can only take a subset of that and restrict it. If you want to expand, then you're talking something else entirely. I've seen profiles used to very good effect in different sectors. So like research and education tends to like to do profiles of things because they've got such a very interesting set of use cases. I've also seen them like generally when you're talking about not a specific sector, but a particular set of requirements where you say, okay, we have a high assurance need. Social media is not at all our use case. We have something where we absolutely have to know who's who, what's what, when, and then you get a high assurance profile, for example. So yeah, the profiles are a very useful way to encourage interoperability when you've got a group that has constrained needs.
Well, let's extend this out to talking about open standards and profiles to everyone's favorite, the MCP. So we hear all about MCPs now, if you're on LinkedIn, but them being labeled as an open standard. What are your thoughts on that as a standard? Heather, we'll start
Shon,
with
would you like to start? Because I've got a soapbox right here, and I'll just hop right on it and go light on fire.
Whoever wants to go. Shon, do you want to go first?
I'm actually interested to see what Heather's going to say here.
Heather, it's back to you.
Okay, so I recently wrote a blog post about this, and it is one of what I call my rage blogs. I mean, it doesn't read like I'm raging, but trust me, what was underneath it was me going, people, you're driving me insane. MCP, the Model Context Protocol, is kind of a universal adapter that allows AI systems to interface with any other system in the same way that an adapter, when you're traveling, you can plug in, one plug and it will go to a different plug in the wall and electricity will still flow. And isn't that glorious? Yes. MCP is a very useful construct for that. What it is not is a standard in any sense of the word. It is an open source project in that the source company, which is Anthropic, bless them, they're doing the right thing. I don't object to MCP. I object to calling it a standard. They've made it an open source project, so anybody can see the code. People can submit issues to the code. People can submit pull requests to the code saying, hey, I've got this idea to enhance this thing in this manner. That's all great. What isn't happening in any kind of recognized structured manner is, okay, did you've got an open source license, but have you done any more IPR checks than that? What about a security evaluation, a proper security evaluation like you would see in the IETF or the W3C or the OpenID Foundation? What about an accessibility review? Even APIs have suggestions for accessibility. What about privacy reviews? All of that stuff feeds into what something would be like in an actual standard. There is a steering committee. I actually learned about that since I wrote that post, but no one can tell me what the steering committee does. What are they steering? So I can't quite tell if this will become a standards organization in the same way that the FIDO Alliance became a standards organization because there was a bunch of entities that all agreed we need to work together to develop this passwordless set of specifications. And so then it didn't fit anywhere else. Great. That's how FIDO Alliance came about. Maybe it wants to do its own form of MCP Alliance. I don't know. Maybe it wants to find, maybe it needs to find a home in something that already exists. I don't know. But whatever it does, however it does it, it is not at this time a standard.
Do you think that that's the direction that it should go? Or do you think there will be like a new standard that will spin out of this?
Well, that's actually a really interesting question because MCP isn't the only universal AI to system adapter in the world, right? There's also, I think it's called A2A out of Google, and I think Microsoft may even have something as well. I don't know enough as to whether one of these should serve as the model for the standard, or if there's like that underlying thread that says, here are the principles that this API needs to build on, and then you can have different APIs that do that and then have some kind of value add that makes them different. I do not know enough to answer that particular question.
It might also not be mature enough as a technology to even have an answer.
I mean, it's a lot of the standards, right, do require 2 independent implementations in order to be considered a standard, because implementation experience is important to know. Like in this case, it's like, what are you even standardizing? So I don't object at all to this having started as an open source project. My concern is the rate it's being adopted without sensible controls around it. It's moving too fast.
I'll add to, like, a lot of technology starts this way. like
Mhm.
especially back in the day. Like the first browsers were not open. Well, they were open source, but there wasn't a standard. V3C came together after, or actually more specifically like ECMAScript, right? Like JavaScript was two competing implementations between Netscape and Microsoft. I just viscerally remember the event models being backwards compared to each other for whatever reason. One was top down, one was bottom up. JavaScript. Anyway, what I find there a couple points about MCP in terms of raging, and then I'll talk about it in a more positive light. It's like I don't understand the need for it. We have all these API standards already, and there's nothing specifically that's magical about MCP. Just seems like a jargon and a thing that was sort of added on to make things a little bit more difficult for people to, it felt like a way of taking control of something, right? So people were coming up with their own ways of connecting LLMs to data sources, and Anthropic said, no, we need you to do it our way. And maybe there's something there. I don't know. But really interesting, and this is a total counterexample. This came up on a call earlier today. We're talking to someone and they're talking about how their company doesn't have OAuth 2 yet, but they use API keys, which actually in their use case, I don't think is wrong, but that's a whole other thing. They don't have any OAuth 2 flows for any of their integrations. And so they are actually implementing it now because they've been mandated to implement an MCP server. And MCP as a part of its implementation actually requires OAuth 2. I think they actually got the guy who did OAuth 2 to sort of like put his rubber stamp on this. And I just found that interesting. So it's like actually helping adoption of standards in some ways, even though it's still nascent and perhaps unneeded. It's just JSON RPC. Like I don't get the magic of it. And JSON RPC was left behind for a reason. It's very verbose. I could go on and on about the technology.
I sense a rage blog in your future.
So many rage blogs. And I love that term. Go ahead, John.
That said, like what it has allowed these LLMs to do is actually pretty cool when you're like, some of the stuff we're able to do in the last just few months where now you're talking to your Git repository or you're talking to some analytics framework. It makes it easier to interrogate systems like that. Did it need to be a special standard or protocol or whatever you want to call it, implementation?
Well, the argument for it being such a thing is the ubiquity of how it's rolling out. I would much rather it's like if everybody is doing their own little unique thing, it's like the old rule, never invent your own cryptographic algorithms. Don't do it. It's just a bad idea. This might be the same kind of thing. Don't invent your own MCP because then no one's going to look at it. You're going to miss the security holes in it. If it's that critical that you need this kind of thing in your life, do something that has more eyes on it. Of course,
well, you bring up security. MCP has its own security constraints. I know that's.
Yeah, let's talk about that. The concerns regarding security and privacy now that not only is AI being heavily adopted in some organizations, but I feel like everyone I speak to is like hooking up everything that they've ever touched to their AI models, and working in the space that we work in, like that makes me really uncomfortable personally. But I'm curious what you guys think, Heather, if you want to start.
I think that I strongly differentiate in my mind between people that are doing this for Gen AI versus people that are doing this for agentic AI. If people are doing this because they're trying to get better grasps on an analysis of the data that they have and can, verify it in separate ways, great, fine, live like you want to live. I like Gen AI quite a bit, actually. If you're doing it because you're trying to establish AI agents in your life, that's a big problem, because there are so many things we don't have solutions for, we don't have best practices for. I'm looking at you, delegation, right? We don't know how to do delegation safely in an agentic AI environment. So what you have to do then instead is say, okay, we'll just make all of the security features for the AI agent more open because we can't do granular authorization. That's a bad idea. We don't like that idea at all. But that's what we're seeing people set up to do things like that. And it's more than a little terrifying.
I don't disagree. Shon, curious your thoughts on, some of the security and privacy situations with some of this stuff.
It's really interesting, right? If you listen to my earlier argument, and I know I rambled, I'm saying MCP is no real different than any other API that you have access to. I think it's the accessibility that people are gaining to the APIs. The data has been out there. These security constraints are set based on things that have already existed. So like MCP is based on OAuth 2. You can limit it with some scopes, but it's not, OAuth 2 isn't really well defined enough for this. And so like, if this is a problem for AI specific things, it's also a problem in the wider world, I think. Like, how do you, and it's not an easy question. I'm not saying there's an easy answer. It's an easy question. It's not an easy answer. Is like the idea of like, how do you attribute who has access to what information? And like, do you tag every piece of information? That tagging has a cost, right? Like, there's just so many different things to think about. And what I find it really actually positive is like, people are now really thinking about it in a way like, man, yeah, we have all this data and it's just flowing, but is that okay? I mean, at least we're talking about it here. I don't know if everyone feels that way.
They're thinking about it, but they're thinking about it after things are starting to roll out. And now we get into this, we're back to the speed, because the speed implies scale. Things are going very fast. They're exploding, which means the scale is getting really big. And for those people that are living by the move fast, break things model, think of the amount of technical debt they're setting themselves up for, right? We don't have the answers to delegation. We don't have the answers to agentic AI and all it can do versus should do in the environment. And yet they're rolling this out. So are they prepared to back up? I bet you they're not. Are they prepared to do something entirely different? Bet you they're not. So it's like we're just saying technical debt. Here, have more. Bad idea.
I mean, is it technical debt or is it by design? Like, these are some of the questions, right? It's like, to your point, can you put that genie back in the bottle once it's like, okay, cool. Like, this model was able to do all of these things because it had all of this access. Now we're going to try to pare that back. There's going to be limitations to the functionality when you do that.
Right.
I don't know.
Paring it back is going to be a cost. And they'll be like, no, wait, we already spent $1 million on this thing, right? And they're like, well, we already put so much into it. We don't want to invest more just to make it less functional. What are you even thinking? Coming from the business perspective, right? So yeah, I call that setting up for technical debt, a whole load of stuff that you are not going to easily change.
Yeah, and I guess for the listeners, because I think we're all aligned on this, what are the risks to allowing this sort of like broad or global access to an AI agent versus like a human agent, an actual human being?
Whew. Okay. So one of the things that jumps out into my mind, looking at, and I'm literally pulling this at random, things like the privacy considerations of eventually we're going to figure out that AI models like this can recreate who is asking and all sorts of information. You basically can track people and build profiles about them because of the sheer number of data sets that the agentic AI might potentially have access to. And if then the AI space is compromised, all of that is just a huge honeypot of information that can be leaked about people and what they were doing and how they were doing it and the credentials they required to get there from here. That's like one aspect of it. If you want to go full on conspiracy theory, let's think about, all right, so now you've got somebody being able to access, via the AI agent, all of these different systems. What happens when they put information into those systems to force hallucinations, to force incorrect answers, to force bad behavior? If you're not prepared to handle that, I think what companies are going to do is they're going to try and go back to ye old hard and crunchy outside, soft and chewy inside model of security. Okay, we don't know how to fix that, so we'll just firewall the heck out of it and that will be fine.
That's a really fun way of calling that. That model, growing up in that, with VPNs and everything. What was I going to, I think I'm less nefarious. So it's like going to be more mistake based. It's going to be like, the way I think about agentic AI specifically, it's like a junior engineer or some like assistant. When you give that assistant access to all your accounts, if it's a real human, they're not as fast as what potentially an AI agent could do, but they're going to make the same mistakes. And so I just wonder if it's more like, you're going to have some really dumb things happen if you give access to some kid off the street and you're like, hey, go book me a flight. And they may end up booking you the opposite flight, or they may use the wrong credit card, or they may, go open up a new account in your credit name because they have access to all this stuff. It's the speed that they're going to be able to do all that stuff. So it all comes down to verification. And this actually goes to your earlier point, Heather. It's like, I'm glad there's going to be so much tech debt being built up, because it means like engineers are still going to have jobs at the end of all this. It's like the AI is not going to replace us. It's not going to take our jobs, so to speak, but some of them.
Well, I am much less optimistic along all of those lines. And I would actually argue that this isn't all about verification. This is all about risk management. And humans are traditionally extraordinarily bad at risk management. But everything we're talking about. So do I think nation state actors are going to get involved in this playground? Absolutely. Do I think the majority of issues out there are probably going to be just stupid little mistakes on an individual level? Absolutely. What should a company do? Risk management. What is your risk appetite? You're not going to be able to avoid all risks. So you really need to sit down with some people who've been trained on how to do this, because you're not going to be able to do it naturally yourself without that training, and figure it out.
Yeah, and I think part of the risk here too is like some of the black box nature of some of these, not the models, but the agents, especially if you're contracting with another piece of software that is then using an agent. It's a lot of degrees separated. And even something like auditing, like I don't know if there's great auditing in most of these tools. Like, what did it actually do?
Not yet. Not yet.
I've used a lot of, agents myself and played around with stuff. And sometimes after, it's 5 minutes of thinking, it'll spit something out. And I'm like, I have no idea how you got to that place. And sometimes it will tell you, and sometimes it won't. And what I'm doing is very surface level stuff, right? Like I'm not going deep. I guess for both of you guys, like when do you think, or how do you think the industry generally will attack that problem of people like maybe like us who are like, I want to know more about what it's doing in the absence of being able to do more like permission based control? Maybe the question is like, do you think that more people want that? Is that something, a place that the industry is going to have to go? To your point, Heather, you feel like it's not yet. Shon, go ahead. I saw you.
I was going to say, I think the technology that leads to the point where these AIs are selling you and are advertising to you is the same technology you're going to need to like sort of log all this stuff. And so, I believe in the AI companies wanting to make $1, and like there's going to be a time when you're going to start doing a query and it's going to offer you a biased response back, maybe like, hey, what is a good movie to see? I don't know. That's such a stupid example. But anyway, like, it's just a basic query. But like that, all that stuff can be leaned towards you. As Heather said, they're like tracking every single prompt we send it. Eventually, if they're doing that, we can also like do some verification. I don't know. That's the dream anyway.
So in answer to the question of when do I think things are going to change, in the time-honored tradition of never waste an emergency, I think it's going to take an emergency. I think it's going to take a massive breach of some kind. I think it's going to take something that would scare the average person. So I know people who have started whole companies because of how their biometric information was lost through the US federal government, right? It's going to take a massive emergency along those lines to start shifting things around a little bit, I think. Otherwise, it's awfully convenient. So yay, go team.
Yeah, I've been kind of saying that behind closed doors too, that like I feel like I hope I'm wrong, but that it'll have to hit like the CNN style news feed, like that level of breach. It's not going to be those little like socially engineered startups that have somebody do a bad thing. It's going to end up being a big one. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it's going to be, but I'm kind of in between the two of you guys. I think there's going to be some honest mistakes, but I also feel like anytime you have technology like this, like there's going to be people that are trying to capitalize on it in a malicious way. The fact that there's not even so little understanding about how this works, but it's like intentionally opaque, right? Always makes me a little bit nervous. But I'm also like tinfoil hat maybe about this. I think like I have just been around, all of us have been around tech for too long and seen like the cycles maybe. Shon, go ahead.
The two things I'll say is like, I think LLMs have a way of being able to influence people in ways that haven't been really thought of yet, or if they've been thought of, like, if you really think about the implications of like some of the things that an LLM could drive you to do. People are idiotic enough to like follow GPS into a river now. Like, what's stopping an idiotic LLM from driving you off the road, or like someone maliciously placing thoughts into there and trying to incept you? I know you guys are talking about like a big data breach, but like the skeptic in me, or the salty person in me, I'm not saying the right word, but it's like we have so many data breaches.
You're looking for the word curmudgeon.
Curmudgeon, there we go. The curmudgeon in me is like, we have so many data breaches now, like it's noise. I don't know if anyone's going to care when China gets all of ChatGPT's data? Like, what are
No,
they going to do with
the
it?
breach is so you're right. We have been, the collective we, the tech industry of the world, with being aided and abetted by regulators, have done a fantastic job of desensitizing users to most things. We've desensitized them to permission prompts, to consent requests, to notifications. All of that has become, that the understandable, regulatory requirements of, if you've got an identity breach and people's data has been lost, you have to say so. Great. Oh, yes, now everybody's saying so. And it's like, yeah, whatever. I just assume my data is now in a database somewhere that's being sold on the dark web. So whatever. That's not actually the kind of breach I'm thinking of, because yes, you know what? Your data, it's already gone. Your usernames, your passwords, your social security numbers, your national ID numbers, where you lived when you were 12, all of that is out there and discoverable. When it turns into money, when we see like massive, large scale identity fraud to the point that like my mom and your mom and, your kid brother and everybody has noticeably lost money into some black pit because of this stuff in AI, that's going to be the moment.
I agree. And I'm the first person to like to say, yeah, everybody already has my data. Like Google knows everything about me at this point, especially with how long I've been on the internet. Like they literally know everything about me. If you wanted to steal my identity, you absolutely could. But yeah, I think it's the downstream effect of that will cause people to be upset. And then that is what trickles up to like, where did all that data come from? And eventually goes back to the source, right? Like I get emails and even physical mail all the time being like, oh, you were affected by XYZ data breach. I'm like, I didn't even remember ever using that tool, but like, okay, what are you going to do at this point? So with that in mind, I think we have time for one more question or one more point, and this might be a gotcha, but how do you think organizations can address that trade-off, right? Of like allowing fast, hopefully not broken AI functionality and maintaining privacy, security, traceability, maybe? Like what would be y'all's recommendations? Heather, you want to start?
I come back to, get people either trained or hire people who actually understand risk management and start making some thoughtful decisions. And the more catchy thing I would say is it's called bleeding edge for a reason. Think really hard before you, donate your corporate blood to this thing.
Oh, I like that. Did it on a pillow. Shon, what are you going to come up with to follow that? Yeah,
but there's no
pressure. Log off.
Well, I think my overall arc in this, thoughts around this, is more like, if you're not already doing it now, like AI is not going to make a difference in your thought process on this. And so just try to stay away from those companies that don't have a SOC 2, for example, or where it is some risk management, or I don't have a good one for that.
Oh,
the bleeding edge.
I wonder if we're going to get a new type of security certification.
That's what I was thinking. SOC 2 AI.
Yeah, that includes like in-house standards or guidance for how you deal with governance or something with your
Are you sure
AI
it doesn't
model.
exist already? I mean,
does it? I don't know.
That sounds like well, of course there will be, because one, it's needed, and two, someone will make money off of that.
There's probably a startup right now that's like working on that. If you're listening, dear listener, that is going to be your next company, hit me up. I want to be in the footer somewhere. Cool. Any final thoughts from either of you guys? This has been super fun. Heather, it's been awesome chatting with you. Anything you want to leave our listeners with?
No. I mean, I'm often referred to as the cheerful voice of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, because I love this stuff. It's so much fun. And yes, it is terrifying and it's a lot, but I would much rather that the world start thinking about it and approaching it with curiosity than either A, panicking and trying to turn it off, or B, sticking their head in the sand. I write about this stuff all the time. I have a blog that I post to every week, and I even started an audio blog for people that don't want to read. 12 minutes.
We will link to that. We will link to that, I'm sure.
Yay.
We post this. Shon, anything from your side? Any parting curmudgeonly thoughts?
I started out as a huge AI skeptic, and I feel like I've been slowly moving more towards like, oh man, there's some real magic here. At the same time, it's just a tool. It's a thing that helps lever and make you do more work more productively. But like all the same problems you had before it, I think exist after it. Now it's just more about, I think Heather put it really well. It's like just it's exploding with all this stuff. Like we've hit a new inflection point. So next few years are going to be interesting.
And I agree with you, Shon, too, about the speed. It's like all the problems that exist now and have existed with technology will potentially, you'll continue to see, but maybe magnified because of the speed.
It's the story of the printing press. continuing.
So if anyone really wants to start diving into what the rate of change means for things like market dominance and whatnot, look up a book called Clock Speed. It's not a new book. It was actually written, I think, a couple decades ago. But Clock Speed, that's exactly what they talk about, how the faster the supply chains change and how companies manage that speed is really a large part of what dictates whether they can have and keep what market dominance they've got. So book recommendation.
Ooh, we will also make that reference, I'm sure, in our clips. Heather, thank you so much for spending time with us. This has been really fun. I'm sure we could do this forever. Like you and Shon could definitely jam on this stuff for a really long time, but I know you spend all day talking about and thinking about this stuff. So really appreciate you being here. Shon, as always, thank you for being here. I'm sure I will talk to you in 5 minutes about something else. And all of our listeners, thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you are interested in learning more about partnerships, APIs, product, SaaS, everything, you can check out our website, pandium.com. We've got a blog that links to other podcasts, and we'll also link to Heather's blog with this video, so you can check her out too. So thanks, everybody. It's been great, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed our content, subscribe to our channel and give us a thumbs up. For more content on tech partnerships, integrations, and APIs, check out our articles, ebooks, and other resources in the description or visit Pandium's website.